Cass looked away, unable to meet her expectant gaze. You're asking me to stay. We are suggesting that you consider it, Vexa corrected. The choice must be yours. But I have a life out there, Cass protested, though the words sounded hollow even to him. What life, really? Endless drifting, brief encounters, temporary fixes, of existence carefully constructed to avoid attachment or meaning. Do you, Lyrae asked softly, or do you merely have habits, routines that protect you from the pain of connection? Cass had no answer to that, at least none he was willing to voice aloud. Instead, he pushed himself to his feet, steadier now that the initial shock of the merging had passed. I need some time, he said. This is a lot to process. The twins nodded in unison, stepping back to give him space. Take what time you need, Lyrae assured him. Siluria is stable now, thanks to you. And grateful, Vexa added. As are we. Cass retreated to his temporary quarters, his mind still reeling from the experience. He had connected with machines before, calibrated them, repaired them, even modified them to his own specifications. But this had been something else entirely. Siluria wasn't just a machine. She was a living entity with thoughts, feelings, and memories that spanned centuries. And now she had his memories too. His losses, his fears, the wounds that had never properly healed. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt strangely seen, understood in a way he had never been before. As he sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at nothing, Cass became aware of a subtle change in the air around him. The walls of his chamber seemed to pulse gently, the ambient light shifting to a warm, comforting glow. It was as if the ship was trying to soothe him, to let him know he wasn't alone in his turmoil. Thanks, he murmured, and felt a gentle wave of warmth wash over him in response. He lay back on the bunk, intending only to rest for a moment, but exhaustion claimed him and he slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Cass awoke hours later, his mind was clearer than it had been in years. The merging had left him with more than just memories of Siluria's past. It had given him a glimpse of what it meant to be truly connected to something larger than himself. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long seemed less absolute, less defining. He found the twins in the control room, a chamber near the front of the ship where crystalline structures arranged in intricate patterns served as navigation instruments. They were conferring quietly, their silver heads bent together over a pulsing display, but looked up as he entered. You look rested, Lyrae observed with a small smile. I feel different, Cass admitted, like something's changed inside me. The bond with Siluria has altered your perception, Vexa explained. You now see with more than just your eyes. Is it permanent? Cass asked, unsure whether the prospect frightened or excited him. That depends on you, Lyrae said. If you choose to leave, the connection will fade over time. If you stay, it will deepen, Vexa finished for her. Become more nuanced, more complete. Cass approached the navigation display, studying the patterns that danced across its surface. To his surprise, he found he could understand them now. Not intellectually, but intuitively. They represented possible paths through the weave, potential journeys Siluria could undertake. Where will you go now? He asked. We have detected faint traces of Silurian presence in a distant sector, Lyrae replied. It may be nothing, an echo of past travelers, but it is the first lead we have had in many cycles. You hope to find others of your kind. Yes, Vexa acknowledged, though we are realistic about the possibilities. Our people have been scattered for generations. Many may have forgotten their heritage entirely. Cass nodded, understanding their longing all too well. Hadn't he spent years searching for something he couldn't even name? A place to belong, perhaps, or people who would see him for who he truly was. I could help with that, he found himself saying, the words emerging before he had fully formed the thought. I know my way around these sectors. And Siluria seems to respond well to me. The twins exchanged a look of cautious hope. You are offering to stay? Lyrae asked carefully. For a while, Cass qualified. To see this through at least. Help you find these other Silurians, if they exist. It was a compromise, a way to test the waters without committing fully. But even as he made the offer, Cass knew something fundamental had shifted within him. The thought of returning to his solitary existence, of severing this newfound connection, filled him with a dread that surprised him with its intensity. "We would welcome your companionship," Vexa said, her usually reserved expression warming with genuine pleasure. And Siluria would be overjoyed. As if in confirmation, the ship's systems hummed with increased energy, the lights brightening noticeably around them. Cass couldn't help but smile at this obvious display of enthusiasm. "I guess that settles it," he said. "For now, at least." In the days that followed, Cass found himself settling into life aboard Siluria with surprising ease. The ship responded to his presence in ways that still amazed him, anticipating his needs, adjusting environmental controls to his preferences, even altering the layout of certain chambers to better suit his work patterns. The twins, too, proved to be excellent companions. Lyrae's gentle wisdom and Vex's sharp intellect complemented each other perfectly, and Cass found himself engaged in conversations that stretched his mind in new directions. They taught him about Silurian history and culture, shared stories of their travels before their long sleep, and listened with genuine interest to his own tales of the outer systems. As they prepared to begin their search for the traces of other Silurians, Cass worked alongside them to ensure Siluria was in optimal condition for the journey. The manual repairs he had initially been brought aboard to perform were now supplemented by his growing intuitive understanding of the ship's systems, a synthesis of engineering knowledge and the empathic bond he had formed during the merging. It was during one such maintenance session, as he fine-tuned the navigation pathways with Lyrae's assistance, that Cass made a disturbing discovery. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, examining a cluster of neural connections that didn't match the patterns he had come to recognize. "What have you found?" Lyrae asked, moving to his side. Cass pointed to the anomalous connections. "These pathways, they're deliberately inhibiting Siluria's long-range sensors. It's like someone wanted to keep her blind to certain frequencies." Lyrae's expression darkened. "Show me." After examining the connections for herself, she called Vexa to join them. The twins conferred in their native language, their musical voices taking on a tone of urgency that needed no translation. "What is it?" Cass asked when they finally turned back to him. "What's wrong?" "These modifications were not made by accident," Vexa said grimly. "They were designed to prevent Siluria from detecting certain energy signatures, specifically those associated with other Silurian vessels." "But why would anyone do that?" Cass asked, confused. "Who would want to isolate you from your own people?" The twins exchanged one of their meaningful glances, and Cass had the distinct impression they were deciding how much to tell him. "There were disagreements among our people before the diaspora," Lyrae finally explained. "Different factions with different visions for our future. Some believe we should remain isolated, preserving our culture in its pure form," Vexa continued. "Others advocated for integration with other species, adaptation rather than preservation." "And which side were you on?" "We were integrationists," Lyrae admitted, "as were most of Siluria's crew. It made us targets for the purest faction." "You think they sabotaged your ship?" Cass asked, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "Disabled these systems to prevent you from finding other Silurians who shared your views?" "It would explain much," Vexa said quietly, "including why we drifted for so long without detecting any signals from our people." Cass felt a surge of indignation on their behalf. "Well, they didn't count on you finding someone who could undo their handiwork, did they?" He turned back to the compromised systems with renewed determination. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see other subtle alterations throughout Siluria's neural pathways, changes designed to limit her capabilities while keeping her functional enough to sustain life. "This is going to take some time," he warned the twins. "These modifications are extensive and deeply integrated." "But you can reverse them?" Lyrae asked, a note of hope in her voice. Cass nodded, already mapping out the necessary repairs in his mind. "Now that I know they're there?" "Absolutely." The work consumed him for the next several days. He barely slept, driven by a determination he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about fixing another broken system anymore. It was about righting a wrong, about helping Siluria and the twins reclaim what had been taken from them. And beneath it all was a growing sense of purpose, of belonging to something larger than himself. This ship, these people, they needed him in a way no one had in longer than he could remember. On the fourth day, as he was recalibrating the final set of sensor arrays, Cass became aware of a presence behind him. He turned to find both twins watching him from the entrance to the chamber, their expressions a mixture of hope and trepidation. "It's done," he told them, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Siluria should be able to detect any Silurian energy signatures now, no matter how faint." "You have done what we thought impossible," Vexa said softly. "Undone the chains that bound us to isolation." "It wasn't that complicated. Once I understood the pattern," Cass demurred, uncomfortable with their gratitude. "Not just the technical repairs," Lirei clarified. "You have given us hope again, reminded us that connection is still possible, even after so much loss." Cass felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. "I just did what needed doing," he said gruffly. But he knew it was more than that for all of them. Later that night, as they gathered in the greenhouse chamber for what had become their regular evening meal, Cass noticed a change in the atmosphere. The bioluminescent plants glowed more vibrantly, casting dancing patterns across the walls and ceiling like a private galaxy. The food, too, seemed especially vibrant in both appearance and flavor. "Is this a special occasion?" he asked, sampling a fruit that tasted like summer sunshine and distant spices. "It is," Lirei confirmed with a smile. "Today marks the beginning of our true journey, our search for our scattered people. Thanks to you, we need no longer drift aimlessly. And Siluria wishes to express her gratitude as well," Vexa added, gesturing to their surroundings. Cass looked around with new understanding. The enhanced beauty of their environment, the exceptional quality of the meal. These were Siluria's gifts, her way of thanking him for his help. "She doesn't need to thank me," he said, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "I'm just glad I could help." "It is more than help you have given us," Lirei said, her gaze direct and unwavering. "It is hope, purpose, things we had nearly forgotten." "Things I had forgotten too," Cass admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "Being here, working with you both, connecting with Siluria, it's reminded me what it feels like to be part of something." The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than he had intended. But instead of the discomfort he expected to feel at such vulnerability, Cass found himself strangely at peace. These beings, the twins and Siluria herself, had seen into the depths of his soul during the merging. There was no point in pretending to be other than who he was. "We feel the same," Vexa said simply. They ate in companionable silence for a while. The only sounds the gentle hum of Siluria's systems and the occasional chime-like notes from the crystalline flora that surrounded them. It was Lirei who finally broached the subject that had been hovering unspoken between them since Cass had completed the repairs. "Have you given thought to what you will do once our search is complete?" she asked. "Whether you will remain with us or return to your previous life." Cass had indeed thought about it, had thought of little else during his rare moments of rest. The question was no longer one of temporary assistance, but of fundamental choice. Who did he want to be? Where did he truly belong? "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I've been on my own for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else." "Yet you have adapted remarkably well to life aboard Siluria," Vexa observed, "to sharing space and purpose with others." "It's different here," Cass acknowledged. "Easier somehow. Maybe because you both understand solitude as well as I do." "Perhaps," Lirei agreed. "Or perhaps because Siluria herself provides a buffer, a living space that responds to all our needs, that connects us without requiring constant interaction." Cass nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. Aboard Siluria, he never felt the claustrophobia or irritation that had always eventually driven him away from prolonged contact with others. There was room to breathe, to be alone when he needed solitude, yet never truly isolated. "I'm not making any long-term decisions yet," he said finally, "but I'm not in a hurry to leave either." It was as much commitment as he could offer for now, but the twins seemed to understand. They raised their glasses in a silent toast, and Cass felt the ship's warmth envelop him like an embrace. The next morning, they set course for the distant sector where traces of Silurian energy had been detected. With her systems fully restored, Siluria moved through space with a grace and power that took Cass's breath away. It wasn't just the speed, though that was impressive enough, but the way she seemed to flow along invisible currents, riding the weave in ways that defied conventional physics. Cass spent hours in the control room, watching in fascination as Lirei and Vexa guided the ship through these unseen pathways. They worked in perfect synchrony, their movements almost dance-like as they interfaced with the crystalline navigation array. "Could you teach me?" he asked impulsively one day as they emerged from a particularly complex maneuver. "How to navigate the weave, I mean." The twins looked surprised, but pleased by his request. "It is not usually something outsiders can learn," Vexa said cautiously. "The ability to sense the weave is typically inborn among our people." But Cass is no longer entirely an outsider, Leary pointed out. His bond with Siluria may have opened pathways that would allow him to perceive the currents. "It's worth trying, at least," Cass suggested, trying to mask his eagerness. The idea of learning something so fundamentally different from the mechanical skills he had relied on all his life was both intimidating and exhilarating. After some discussion, they agreed to attempt a basic teaching session. Lirei guided Cass to a position between them at the navigation array, placing his hands on specific points of the crystalline structure. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Don't try to see with your physical senses. Reach out instead with the part of you that connected with Siluria during the merging." Cass did as she suggested, closing his eyes and trying to recapture the sensation of the bond he had formed with the ship. For several minutes, he felt nothing but the cool, smooth surface beneath his palms. Then, gradually, a new awareness began to unfold within him. Subtle at first, like the first hint of dawn on the horizon, then stronger, more defined. He could sense the weave now, not as visible pathways, but as currents of energy that flowed around and through Siluria, connecting distant points in ways that transcended normal space. "I can feel it," he whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the tenuous connection. "Good." Vex's voice came from beside him, equally soft. "Now, can you sense the divergence ahead? The place where the currents split into multiple streams." Cass focused, stretching his newfound perception. "Yes, 3 paths, each leading in a different direction. Which feels strongest to you?" Lirei asked. Cass concentrated, try to gauge the intensity of each current. "The one to the left." "No, not strongest exactly. Most resonant." He heard the twins exchange words in their language, a note of surprise evident even without translation. "What is it?" he asked, opening his eyes and losing the connection to the weave in the process. "You identified the path that leads most directly toward the Silurian energy signature we detected," Vexa explained, her expression thoughtful. "Even we were uncertain which branch to follow." "Beginner's luck?" Cass suggested, though he knew it was more than that. Something about the leftmost path had called to him specifically, a harmony that matched some frequency within himself. "Perhaps," Lirei said, but her tone made it clear she didn't believe it was mere chance. "Or perhaps your unique perspective allows you to perceive aspects of the weave that even we, with our lifelong training, might miss." The implications of that possibility hung between them, unspoken but profound. If Cass could indeed sense things in the weave that the twins could not, his value to their mission, and to them personally, increased exponentially. Over the following weeks, as Siluria followed the path Cass had identified, his training in weave navigation continued. Each session built upon the last, his perception growing sharper, more nuanced. He began to recognize different flavors of energy within the currents, subtle variations that indicated the age of the pathway or the nature of what lay at its end. And through it all, his bond with Siluria deepened. The ship responded to his presence with increasing sensitivity, sometimes adjusting course or environmental conditions based solely on his unspoken preferences. It was as if they were engaged in a constant, wordless conversation, a sharing of needs and desires that required no conscious thought. The twins observed this developing relationship with a mixture of wonder and what Cass sometimes thought might be envy. They had been Siluria's caretakers for centuries, yet in some ways, his connection with the ship now rivaled theirs. "Does it bother you?" he asked Vexo one evening when they found themselves alone in the control room during a rare moment of downtime. "How quickly Siluria and I have bonded." Vexa considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness before answering. "It is not a competition, Cass. Siluria's capacity for connection is not limited, as a human heart might be. Her consciousness can encompass many bonds without diminishing any. But you and Lyrae were alone with her for so long. And now suddenly there's this interloper who barely understands your culture or history, yet somehow forms this intense connection. You underestimate yourself." Vexa interrupted gently. "Your understanding may be different from ours, but it is no less valid. Siluria responds to you because you see her truly, not as a relic of a lost civilization or a means of preserving our heritage, but as a living being with needs and desires of her own." Cass hadn't thought of it that way before, but he recognized the truth in Vexa's words. While he respected the ship's history and significance to Silurian culture, his primary relationship with her was more immediate, more personal. To him, Siluria was first and foremost a magnificent entity deserving of care and understanding in her own right. Besides, Vexa added with a rare smile, "Your presence has brought new vitality to Siluria and to us as well. It has been too long since we shared our journey with someone who sees the universe with fresh eyes." The conversation stayed with Cass long after they parted for the night. He had been so focused on what he was gaining from this unexpected detour in his life that he hadn't fully considered what he might be giving in return, not just to Siluria, but to the twins as well. Their existence had been defined by loss and duty for centuries. Perhaps what they needed most wasn't just another pair of hands for repairs, or even another navigator for the weave, but simply the presence of someone new, someone who could help them see their world differently, who could remind them that connection was still possible even after so much had been lost. As he drifted toward sleep in his chamber, Cass felt Siluria's consciousness brush against his own, a gentle, questioning touch, as if checking on his well-being. "I'm fine," he murmured aloud, "just thinking about belonging." The ship's response was a wave of warmth that seemed to say she understood completely. After nearly a month of travel through the weave, they finally approached the source of the Silurian energy signature. Excitement and tension filled Siluria's chambers as they prepared for what might be their first contact with other Silurians in centuries. "We should be cautious," Vexa advised as they gathered in the control room. "We do not know which faction these might be, integrationists like ourselves, or purists who might see our approach as unwelcome." "Can't Siluria tell?" Cass asked. "I thought the ship could sense the nature of other Silurian vessels." "Normally, yes," Lyrae confirmed. "But the signal is unusual, fragmented in ways we haven't encountered before. It could be a damaged ship, or was something else entirely." "Well, there's only one way to find out," Cass said, taking his now customary position at the navigation array. "Let's get a little closer, but keep our distance until we know what we're dealing with." The twins nodded in agreement, and together they guided Siluria through the final stretch of their journey. As they emerged from the weave into normal space, the source of the energy signature came into view on their sensors. "It wasn't a ship. What am I looking at?" Cass asked, staring at the visual representation that hovered before them. "It appears to be some kind of installation," Vexa said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "A station, perhaps, but it's Silurian in origin." Cass pressed, noticing how both twins had gone very still. "Yes," Lyrae whispered. "Unmistakably so. Those patterns, those energy emissions, they could only be produced by our technology." "Then this is good news, right?" Cass looked between them, confused by their obvious distress. "It means there are other Silurians out here, or were at some point." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Vexa answered. It is complicated, she said carefully. This installation bears markers of purest design. Highly defensive, isolated, self-contained. Not the kind of outpost integrationists would typically establish. So these might be the same people who sabotaged Siluria? Cass asked, understanding dawning. The ones who try to keep you isolated? Possibly, Lyrae acknowledged. Or their descendants, at least. Cass considered this new information, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. What do you want to do? We could turn back, look for other Silurian traces elsewhere. The twins were silent for a long moment, communing with each other and perhaps with Siluria as well. Finally, Lyrae spoke. No, we have come too far to turn away now. Whatever awaits us there, friend or foe, welcome or rejection, we must face it. We owe it to our people, Vexa added firmly, to learn what became of them, even if the truth is not what we hoped for. Cass nodded, respect for their courage welling within him. Then let's proceed, carefully. As they approached the installation, more details became visible. It was smaller than they had initially thought, not a full station, but rather an outpost or waypoint. Its design was indeed Silurian, but with modifications that spoke of adaptation to limited resources and isolation. No signs of active defenses, Cass noted as they scanned the structure. Power readings are minimal, but present. Life signs, Lyrae asked tensely. Cass checked the readings again, wanting to be certain. Yes, but very few. Maybe 3 or 4 individuals at most. A skeleton crew, Vexa murmured. Or perhaps all that remains. They established orbit around the installation at a respectful distance and attempted communication on various Silurian frequencies. For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then, just as they were considering their next move, the comm system activated. Identify yourselves, came a voice, speaking in the Silurian language, but with an accent that made the twins exchange startled glances. Lyrae responded in the same tongue, introducing herself, Vexa, and Siluria. She made no mention of Cass, perhaps wanting to establish their Silurian credentials first before complicating matters. The exchange continued for several minutes, with Cass unable to understand the words, but picking up on the changing emotional undercurrents. The initial wariness in the unknown Silurian's voice gave way to astonishment, then something that sounded like reverence. When the communication ended, both twins appeared shaken. What is it? Cass asked. What did they say? They know of Siluria, Lyrae explained, her voice trembling slightly. They have preserved stories of her in their archives, stories of the great living ships that once carried our people among the stars. But they thought all such vessels have been lost in the diaspora, Vexa continued. To them, we are like ghosts returning from a mythic past. Are they purists? Cass asked, getting to what he considered the most pressing concern. They do not think in those terms anymore, Lyrae said, a note of wonder in her voice. They say such distinctions lost meaning generations ago, when survival became the only priority. They've invited us to dock, Vexa added, to meet in person. Cass frowned, still cautious. Could be a trap. I do not believe so, Lyrae said thoughtfully. There was genuine awe in their voices. And Siluria herself seems eager for the encounter. Indeed, the ship's systems were humming with an energy that Cass had come to recognize as excitement or anticipation. Whatever old wounds might exist between the factions, Siluria at least seemed ready to move beyond them. All right, he conceded, but I'm coming with you. They may be alarmed by your presence, Vexa warned. Humans were not among the species our people commonly allied with. I'm not staying behind, Cass said firmly. If there's any danger, you'll need all the help you can get. After a brief discussion, the twins agreed to his condition. They would introduce him as a valued ally who had helped restore Siluria, which was true enough, if not the complete story of his connection to the ship. As they prepared to dock with the installation, Cass felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. This meeting represented everything the twins had been searching for, a connection to their lost people, a piece of their scattered heritage. But it also carried risks, both physical and emotional. What if these isolated Silurians rejected them? What if centuries of separation had changed their people beyond recognition? And beneath these concerns lay a more personal anxiety. What would this discovery mean for his place among them? If the twins found a community of their own kind, would there still be room for him in their lives? Siluria seemed to sense his unease, sending waves of reassurance through their bond. Whatever happened, she at least would still want him near. That knowledge steadied him as they made final preparations to face whatever awaited them aboard the ancient outpost. The docking procedure was executed with precision, Siluria's living systems adapting seamlessly to the more rigid, mechanical nature of the installation's port. As the airlock cycled, Cass found himself holding his breath, one hand resting near the small blaster he had insisted on bringing despite the twins' assurances it wouldn't be necessary. When the inner doors finally opened, they revealed a reception party of 3 Silurians, 2 with the silver hair characteristic of the twins' lineage, and 1 with darker coloration that Cass hadn't seen before. All 3 were dressed in simple, practical garments that showed signs of extensive repair and adaptation. For a moment, both groups simply stared at each other, the weight of centuries of separation hanging in the air between them. Then the eldest of the installation Silurians stepped forward, hands extended in what Cass recognized as a traditional greeting gesture that the twins had taught him. "Welcome, children of the diaspora," he said in heavily accented standard, clearly making an effort to include Cass in the greeting. "I am Talon, keeper of this waypoint. These are my companions, Mira and Doran." Lyrae stepped forward to complete the greeting ritual, her hands meeting Talon's in the intricate pattern of acknowledgement. "We are honored by your welcome, Keeper Talon. I am Lyrae, this is my sister Vexa, and our human ally, Cass Breener." If Talon was surprised by Cass's presence, he hid it well. "Any friend of Siluria's crew is welcome here," he said, inclining his head respectfully. The formalities completed, Talon invited them to follow him deeper into the installation. As they walked, Cass noted the curious blend of ancient Silurian design and makeshift adaptations that characterized the station. It was clear that its inhabitants had been maintaining it with limited resources for a very long time. They were led to what appeared to be a gathering space, a circular chamber with a low table at its center and cushions arranged for seating. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting what Cass assumed were scenes from Silurian history, including several that featured living ships like Siluria. Once they were settled, Talon addressed the obvious questions hanging between them. "You must have many queries about our presence here, as we have about yours," he began. This waypoint was established during the early days of the diaspora, one of many such outposts created to help scattered Silurians find each other again. "We had no record of such waypoints," Vexa said, her tone carefully neutral. "They were not widely publicized," Talon acknowledged. "The times were chaotic. Trust was in short supply, even among our own people. Yet you maintained this one all these centuries," Lyrae observed. "What?" Talon's gaze grew distant. "Hope, perhaps, or duty. Each generation of keepers has passed the responsibility to the next, maintaining the beacon, preserving what knowledge we could salvage of our people's journey." "Have others come?" Vexa asked. The question Cass knew was foremost in both twins' minds. "Other Silurians seeking connection?" Some, Talon confirmed. "Over the centuries, we have encountered perhaps 24 small groups. Families or individuals, mostly. We share what information we have, offer respite and supplies when needed, and record their intended destinations." "And where did they go?" Lyrae leaned forward, her usual serene demeanor betraying an intense curiosity. "Various places," Talon said. "Some sought to establish new colonies on uninhabited worlds. Others chose to integrate with existing civilizations where they might find acceptance. A few continued searching for rumored gatherings of our people in distant sectors. And you remained here," Cass observed, "keeping the beacon lit." Talon turned to him, seeming to truly focus on the human for the first time. "Yes, it is the task my family undertook generations ago. A noble calling," Cass said sincerely, feeling a kinship with these caretakers despite their alien nature. Hadn't he also dedicated his life to keeping things functional, maintaining connections others had abandoned? But now you're only 3, Vexa noted gently. Is this all that remains of your lineage? A shadow passed over Talon's features. Our numbers have dwindled over time. The younger generations often choose to leave with passing travelers, seeking wider horizons than this station can provide. And you? Lyrae asked. Have you never wished to join those seekers? My place is here, Talon said simply, without regret or resentment, as it has been for all keepers before me. The conversation continued long into what passed for evening aboard the station, with both sides sharing their histories and experiences. The twins told of their centuries in stasis aboard Siluria, their awakening, and their search for other survivors. They spoke of the sabotage they had discovered in their quest to reconnect with their scattered people. In turn, Talon and his companions shared what records they had preserved of Siluria migrations, the last known locations of various groups, and the changes their society had undergone in diaspora. As Lyrae had reported, the old factional divisions had indeed faded with time, replaced by more practical concerns of survival and adaptation. Throughout the exchange, Cass remained largely silent, absorbing the information and observing the interactions. He noticed how Talon occasionally glanced his way with poorly concealed curiosity, clearly wondering about his role in this reunion, but too polite to ask directly. Finally, as the gathering began to wind down, the elder Silurian addressed him directly. And you, Cass Breener, Talon said, how came you to travel with the Guardians of Siluria? It is an unusual partnership, by any measure. Cass looked to the twins, silently asking how much he should reveal. Lyrae gave a slight nod, encouraging him to speak truthfully. I responded to a distress call, he said, deciding that simplicity was best. Found Siluria adrift, met these two, and ended up helping repair some damaged systems. A modest account, Vexa commented with a hint of amusement. What Cass omits is that he restored Siluria's consciousness when we thought it impossible. He formed a bond with her that we had not seen in generations. Talon's expression shifted to one of astonishment. A human bonded with a Silurian vessel? Such a thing is not recorded in any of our histories. We believe it is unprecedented, Lyrae confirmed. Yet it happened. Cass's resonance with Siluria is genuine and profound. The elder Silurian studied Cass with new interest. Perhaps it is fitting, he said finally. Our oldest texts speak of the living ships as beings capable of forging connections beyond our understanding, choosing their companions based on harmony of spirit rather than bloodline. Still, added Mira, speaking for the first time, it is remarkable. May I ask, Cass Breener, how you perceive this bond? What is it like for a human to connect with a Silurian consciousness? Cass shifted uncomfortably under their collective gaze. He'd never been good at articulating feelings, preferring the concrete language of mechanics and engineering. But this question deserved an honest answer. It's like, he began, searching for words, like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. Siluria doesn't just communicate with me. She understands me, sometimes better than I understand myself. And somehow, I understand her too, not just her systems, but her essence. He paused, embarrassed by his own eloquence. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. On the contrary, Talon said softly, you explain it very well. The ancient bonding, as described in our archives, was said to be exactly as you described, a recognition of kindred spirits across the boundaries of form. The conversation drifted to other topics after that, but Cass noticed that the Silurians' attitude toward him had subtly changed. There was a new respect in their gaze, a tentative acceptance that went beyond mere politeness. Later, as they prepared to return to Siluria for the night, Talon approached Cass privately. Your arrival with Siluria and her guardians is more significant than you may realize, the elder said quietly. For generations, we keepers have maintained this outpost, preserving what knowledge we could of our people's past. But increasingly, we have questioned whether there would be any future to preserve for. And now, Cass asked. Now, I have seen with my own eyes what was thought impossible. One of the great living ships, still functioning after all these centuries. And more remarkably, forming a new kind of bond, one that transcends the limitations of our past thinking. Talon's eyes gleamed with an intensity that belied his age. It gives me hope that our people might yet find a path forward, one that honors our heritage without being constrained by it. I'm not sure I'm the embodiment of hope you're looking for, Cass said honestly. I'm just a repair guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Perhaps, Talon said with a smile. Or perhaps Siluria found exactly the companion she needed. One who sees value in restoring what others would abandon, in bridging gaps others would leave unmended. The words stayed with Cass as they returned to Siluria, echoing in his mind as he prepared for sleep. He had never thought of his work as particularly meaningful. Necessary, yes, but not transformative. Yet through Talon's eyes, his everyday acts of repair and maintenance took on a new significance. Over the next few days, the twins spent most of their time at the waypoint, absorbing the accumulated knowledge of generations of keepers. They accessed ancient archives, studied star charts marked with the last known locations of Silurian groups, and engaged in long conversations with Talon about the future of their scattered people. Cass divided his time between assisting with these research efforts and conducting maintenance on both Siluria and the aging waypoint. The latter was in desperate need of attention, its systems jury-rigged and patched over centuries of isolation. It was the kind of challenge Cass relished. Complex problems requiring creative solutions with limited resources. Working alongside Doran, the youngest of the Waypoint Silurians, Cass found unexpected common ground. Despite their different species and backgrounds, they shared an engineer's perspective and a pragmatic approach to problem solving. This power coupling shouldn't work at all, Cass muttered one day, examining a particularly creative adaptation in the station's life support system. But somehow it does. Necessity breeds innovation, Doran replied with a shrug. When replacement parts haven't been available for 3 generations, you learn to improvise. It's impressive, Cass admitted. I've seen professional engineers with all the resources of a planetary shipyard who couldn't match this level of ingenuity. Doran's usually stoic expression warmed slightly at the praise. We preserve what we can, adapt what we must. Is the way of our people now. My way too, Cass said, thinking of his own patchwork shuttle and the countless makeshift repairs he'd performed over the years. There's something satisfying about making things work when they shouldn't. Indeed, Doran handed him a tool, one of Cass's own, but modified with Silurian technology to better interface with the station systems. Though I admit, having access to Siluria's resources these past days has been refreshing. Cass nodded, understanding the unspoken sentiment. The Waypoint Silurians had maintained their post with remarkable dedication, but the isolation and resource scarcity had taken a toll. They seemed both invigorated and overwhelmed by the sudden connection to their heritage in the form of Siluria and her guardians. On the 5th day of their stay, Lyrae sought Cass out in the engineering bay where he had been working. Her expression was thoughtful, her manner more reserved than usual. The archives here contain more information than we ever hoped to find, she said without preamble. Star charts, migration records, even cultural data preserved from before the diaspora. That's good, right? Cass prompted when she fell silent. Yes, she agreed. But it also presents us with choices. Cass set down his tools, giving her his full attention. What kind of choices? The records indicate several locations where significant numbers of our people settled, Lyrae explained. Some established colonies on distant worlds. Others integrated into existing civilizations. Still others formed nomadic fleets that traveled together for mutual protection. And you're trying to decide which to seek out first, Cass guessed. Among other considerations, Lyrae acknowledged. Talon has also proposed that the waypoint itself might relocate to join us aboard Siluria. The station's resources are dwindling, and their knowledge would be better preserved within our archives. They want to abandon the waypoint. Cass was surprised. After all these generations of keeping it operational, Its purpose has been fulfilled, Leary said simply. It existed to facilitate reconnection, to preserve knowledge until it could be shared with other survivors. If they join us aboard Siluria, that knowledge remains intact, but gains mobility, the ability to reach more of our scattered people. Cass considered this. From a practical standpoint, it made perfect sense. The waypoint was barely functional, maintained by a dwindling crew with inadequate resources. Siluria, by contrast, was fully restored and capable of traversing vast distances through the weave. The knowledge preserved here would indeed be more useful if it could be brought to other Silurian communities rather than waiting for them to find this remote outpost. But that's not the only consideration, he said, sensing Leary's hesitation. No, she admitted. There is also the question of our future course, yours included. And there it was, the unspoken concern that had been hovering at the edges of Cass's consciousness since they discovered the waypoint. With concrete evidence of surviving Silurian communities, the twins now had clear destinations and purpose. Where did that leave him? I assumed you'd want to find these other Silurians, he said carefully. It's what you've been searching for all along. It is, Leary agreed. But our journey together has changed us, Cass. Changed our expectations, our priorities. The simple fact is that we have come to value your presence, your companionship, as much as the prospect of reuniting with our own kind. The admission touched something deep within Cass, a place that had been cold and empty for longer than he cared to remember. Still, doubt nagged at him. I'm still an outsider, he pointed out. If you find a whole colony of Silurians, I'll be out of place. And what about Siluria? She'll have dozens of potential navigators, people who were born with the ability to connect with her. You underestimate your importance, Leary said firmly. Your bond with Siluria is unique, different from anything in our traditions, yes, but no less valid for that. In some ways, it may be more profound precisely because it transcends the expected parameters. Before Cass could respond, a gentle chime echoed through the station, the signal for a gathering. Leary sighed, their conversation interrupted. We should join the others, she said. But please, Cass, know that whatever course we chart, we wish you to be part of it. Not out of obligation or necessity, but because we, Vexa, Siluria, and I, have come to think of you as family. She departed before he could formulate a response, leaving him with a tumult of emotions he wasn't equipped to process. Family. The word struck him like a physical blow, dredging up memories he had long suppressed, of loss, of abandonment, of the walls he had built to ensure he would never feel such pain again. Yet alongside the fear was something else, a yearning he had denied for years, a desire for connection that had never truly died despite his best efforts to bury it. Siluria sensed his turmoil, reaching out through their bond with waves of warmth and reassurance. Her consciousness enveloped his, not invasive but supportive, like a steadying hand on his shoulder. Thanks, he murmured aloud, drawing comfort from her presence. At least you're not complicated. The response he received was a sensation that could only be interpreted as gentle amusement, and Cass found himself smiling despite his conflicted feelings. Whatever happened next, he knew that his connection with Siluria at least was genuine and enduring. He made his way to the gathering chamber, where he found the others already assembled. To his surprise, the atmosphere was one of celebration rather than the solemn discussion he had expected. Doran was setting out what appeared to be refreshments, while Mira and Vexa arranged unusual crystalline objects on the central table. What's going on? He asked, taking the seat Leary had saved for him. A ritual of connection, she explained quietly. It is traditional when Silurians from different lineages reunite after long separation, a sharing of memories and hopes. Talon took a position at the head of the circle, lifting one of the crystal objects, a multifaceted prism that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. In days past, our people gathered thus to renew bonds of kinship and community, the elder intoned, his voice taking on a formal cadence. Today, we honor that tradition as we prepare to chart a new course together. One by one, The Silurians each took up a crystal, holding it between their palms until it began to glow with an inner light that matched their silver eyes. When all four had activated their crystals, they placed them in a pattern at the center of the table, the lights within pulsing in a complex rhythm that gradually synchronized into a single, harmonious beat. The heartbeat of our shared heritage, Talon explained, seeing Cass's fascination with the display. Each crystal contains memories, historical records, personal experiences, cultural knowledge, passed down through generations. When brought together, they create a unified repository of our collective journey. It's beautiful, Cass said honestly. It is also practical, Vexa added. This synchronization will facilitate the integration of the Waypoint's archives with Siluria's memory systems. Then you've decided? Cass looked between the twins and the Waypoint Silurians. You're merging your operations? We are, Talon confirmed. This outpost has served its purpose faithfully, but the time has come to carry its knowledge forward, to actively seek out our scattered kindred rather than waiting for chance encounters. And all of you will be coming aboard Siluria? Cass asked, wanting to be certain of the plan. If she will have us, Mira said, a note of uncertainty in her voice. We understand it is no small thing to ask a living ship to accept new crew members. Siluria welcomes you, Lyrae assured her. She senses your dedication to our people's heritage and your desire to see it preserved and renewed. There was more to the ritual after that. Formal words exchanged, promises made, plans discussed for the transfer of essential materials from the Waypoint to Siluria. Cass participated where he could, but mostly observed, struck by the significance of the moment. After centuries of isolation, these two branches of Silurian society were reuniting, combining their knowledge and resources for a common purpose. And somehow, improbably, he had become part of this pivotal moment in their history. Later, as the formal proceedings concluded and the gathering transitioned to a more relaxed celebration, Vexa found him watching from a quiet corner. You seem pensive, she observed, offering him a cup of the sweet, spiced beverage the Waypoint Silurians had prepared. Just taking it all in, Cass replied, accepting the drink. It's a lot to process, for you all especially, I imagine. Indeed, Vexa agreed. When we awoke from stasis, Lyrae and I believed ourselves to be among the last preservers of Silurian heritage, to discover others who have maintained our traditions, who have records we thought lost forever. It is overwhelming in the best possible way. And now you have a whole new mission, Cass noted. Finding these other communities, bringing them the knowledge you've recovered. Yes, Vexa studied him over the rim of her cup. But there is something troubling you about this development. It wasn't a question, and Cass didn't bother denying it. Vexa had always been perceptive, perhaps even more so than her sister. I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in all this, he admitted. Before, you needed me to help fix Siluria, to understand her systems. Now you'll have 3 more Silurians on board, including Doran, who's a pretty talented engineer in his own right. Your concern is that you will become redundant. Vex's tone suggested she found the very idea absurd. Not exactly redundant, Cass clarified. Just less essential. And that's fine, he added quickly. It's good that you'll have more of your own people with you. I just need to adjust my expectations, that's all. Vexa was silent for a moment, her expression thoughtful. You humans have an interesting tendency to categorize relationships in terms of utility, she said finally. To measure your worth by what functions you can perform for others. Isn't that universal? Cass asked. Defining yourself by what you contribute. There is a difference between contribution and worth, Vexa corrected gently. Yes, your technical skills have been valuable to us. But that is not why we wish you to remain with us, Cass. Then why? The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. Because in our time together, you have become more than a useful ally or a skilled engineer, Vexa said simply. You have become someone whose presence brings us joy, whose perspective enriches our understanding, whose very being has become intertwined with our own. She touched his arm lightly, the gesture conveying a depth of feeling that her reserved manner usually concealed. In Silurian tradition, family is not defined by blood or species, but by choice, by the conscious decision to walk a shared path. Lirai and I made that choice long ago, with each other and with Siluria. Now we make it with you as well, if you will accept it. Cass stared at her, momentarily lost for words. He had spent so many years defining himself by what he could fix, what he could build, what practical value he could provide. The idea that someone might want him around simply for who he was, not what he could do, was almost incomprehensible. Yet the sincerity in Vex's eyes was unmistakable, and beyond her words, he felt Siluria's presence in his mind, echoing the sentiment. A wordless confirmation that his place among them had never been contingent on his usefulness alone. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You need not say anything now," Vexa assured him. "Just know that whatever course you choose, you will always have a home with us aboard Siluria." The preparations for departing the waypoint and integrating its crew and resources into Siluria took several days. Cass threw himself into the work, grateful for the practical tasks that gave him time to process the emotional revelations of recent conversations. He worked closely with Doran to identify which systems and materials from the waypoint were worth salvaging and how they might be adapted for use aboard Siluria. The young Silurian engineer proved to be an excellent collaborator, respectful of Cass's expertise while offering valuable insights from his own unique background. "It's fascinating how Siluria's systems adapt to new components," Doran observed as they installed a particularly elegant sensor array salvaged from the Waypoint's observatory. "Like she's learning from the integration, not just accepting it." "That's exactly what she's doing," Cass confirmed. "Her neural pathways actually reconfigure to optimize new connections. It's unlike any system I've ever worked with. Yet you navigate it with remarkable ease," Doran noted. "Talon says your bond with her is unprecedented for a non-Silurian." Cass focused on adjusting a calibration rather than meeting the younger engineer's curious gaze. "It just happened. I can't really explain it." "You don't need to explain," Doran assured him. "Some things simply are beyond rationalization or precedent. That's a lesson we waypoint keepers learned generations ago." The simple acceptance in Doran's words eased something tight in Cass's chest. Among the waypoint Silurians, there was none of the factionalism or rigid thinking that had led to the sabotage of Siluria centuries before. They had adapted to their circumstances, embraced change as necessary for survival, and in doing so, perhaps preserved something more essential about their culture than any dogmatic adherence to tradition could have. On the final evening before their planned departure, Talon invited Cass to join him in the Waypoint's small observatory, a chamber at the station's apex with a transparent dome that offered an unobstructed view of the surrounding starfield. "I come here often to reflect," the elder said as Cass admired the spectacular vista, "to remember our journey and contemplate what lies ahead." "It's an amazing view," Cass acknowledged. "You'll miss it aboard Siluria." "Perhaps," Talon agreed, "though I suspect Siluria will offer vistas even more breathtaking once we begin our travels through the weave." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching distant stars shimmer against the velvet backdrop of space. "I wish to speak with you privately," Talon said eventually, "to express my personal gratitude for what you have done for our people." Cass started to demur, but Talon raised a hand to forestall his protest. "It is no small thing to restore a living ship, to reforge a connection many believed lost forever," the elder continued. "In doing so, you have given us more than just Siluria's physical presence. You have given us renewed purpose, a bridge between our past and a possible future." "I just fixed what was broken," Cass said simply. "The twins did the hard part, keeping Siluria alive all those years, preserving your history. Yet it was your intervention that transformed maintenance into renewal," Talon countered. "Your unique perspective that allowed you to see possibilities where others saw only damaged systems." The elder turned to face him directly, his silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "The others have told me of your concerns about your place among us now that our numbers have increased. I wish to assure you that your value to this mission, to this family we are forming, remains undiminished." Cass shifted uncomfortably under the direct address. "I appreciate that, but..." In fact, Talon continued, undeterred, I believe your role may be more essential than ever as we seek out other Silurian communities. Many will have become insular over the centuries, suspicious of change or outside influence. Your presence among us demonstrates in the most concrete way possible that our people's future lies in connection, not isolation. The perspective wasn't one Cass had considered before. He had been so focused on his technical contributions that he hadn't thought about the symbolic significance of his inclusion in their crew. You think they'll be more accepting of other species if they see I'm part of your family? He asked, the last word still feeling foreign on his tongue. I think you embody the very principle that divided our people before the diaspora, Talon said. The question of whether Silurians should remain separate and pure, or whether we should engage with the broader cosmic community. Your bond with Siluria, your integration into her crew, these demonstrate that the latter path not only works but strengthens us. Talon's words resonated with something Cass had been feeling but couldn't articulate, that his unexpected connection with Siluria and the twins represented more than just a personal relationship. It suggested possibilities for the future, not just for himself, but for an entire displaced culture seeking to redefine itself. I hadn't thought of it that way, he admitted. Consider it now, Talon suggested, and know that whatever you decide about your own path, you have already changed ours irrevocably, and for the better. The next morning, as they prepared for final departure, Cass stood in Siluria's control room, watching the waypoint through the ship's visual sensors. The station looked smaller now, dimmer with most of its systems powered down. Soon it would be abandoned entirely, its purpose fulfilled after centuries of patient vigilance. A complex mix of emotions swept through him as he contemplated the journey ahead. Excitement at the prospect of discovering new Silurian communities. Apprehension about how he would be received. Lingering uncertainty about his long-term place in this evolving family unit. But beneath these surface feelings ran a deeper current, a sense of rightness, a belonging, that he hadn't experienced since childhood. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them not alone, but as part of something larger than himself. Lyrae and Vexa entered the control room together, followed by the 3 waypoint Silurians. All 5 took positions around a navigation array, ready to guide Siluria away from the station and back into the weave. Cass, Lyrae called, gesturing to an open position between herself and Talon. Will you join us? For a heartbeat, Cass hesitated, aware of the significance of the moment. Then he stepped forward, taking his place in the circle as if he had always belonged there. Course is set for the nearest confirmed Silurian settlement, Vexa announced. Navigation systems optimal. Life support balanced for mixed crew, Doran reported. All systems integrated and functioning at peak efficiency. Siluria expresses readiness and anticipation, Lyrae added, smiling as she sensed the ship's eager mood. Talon looked at Cass. As our newest navigator, would you like to give the command to depart? Cass felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, humility, determination, as he placed his hands on the crystalline controls. Through his bond with Siluria, he sensed a response, a surge of warmth and readiness that matched his own feelings. Let's go find your people, he said simply. As one, they guided Siluria away from the waypoint, her living systems responding with fluid grace to their combined direction. The stars stretched and blurred as they entered the weave, embarking on a journey that would take them to scattered communities of Silurians across the galaxy. A mission of reconnection, of healing rifts centuries old. Weeks later, as they approached the coordinates of the first settlement, Lyrae found Cass in the greenhouse chamber, seated beside one of the bioluminescent plants that had become his favorite spot for quiet reflection. We will arrive tomorrow, she said, settling beside him. Are you ready? As I'll ever be, he replied with a small smile. How about you? Nervous about meeting these distant relatives of yours? Curious more than nervous, Lyrae admitted. They have been isolated for generations. We cannot know how they have changed, what traditions they have preserved or discarded. Well, they're probably going to be surprised by all of us, Cass pointed out. A legendary living ship showing up with a mixed crew, including a human, wasn't likely in their plans for the day. Lirei laughed, the musical sound echoing pleasantly in the garden chamber. Indeed not. But perhaps that is precisely what they need, a reminder that the universe remains full of possibilities beyond expectation. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the gentle pulsing of the plants around them. Siluria's presence enveloped them both in a cocoon of warmth and security, a living home drifting between the stars. Lirei, Cass said eventually, when we first met, you and Vexa asked if I'd stay forever. I didn't answer then because I couldn't imagine committing to anything permanent. I remember, she said softly. You said you didn't know what forever meant, but that you were here now. I still don't know about forever, Cass admitted. But I do know that I want to see this through, all of it. Finding the scattered Silurians, helping rebuild these connections, being part of whatever this is becoming. Family, Lirei supplied, her silver eyes warm with affection. That is the word you are looking for, I believe. Family, Cass echoed, testing the word, finding that it no longer filled him with the dread or resistance it once had. Yeah, I guess it is. Lirei's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own in a gesture that bridged the differences between their species, their origins, their separate journeys that had somehow converged into a shared path. Then welcome home, Cass Breener, she said simply, for as long as you choose to stay. Through their bond, Siluria's consciousness brushed against his, not with words, but with feelings, acceptance, joy, belonging. The great living ship that had drawn him from his solitary existence now carried him toward a future he could never have imagined, surrounded by beings who valued him not just for what he could fix, but for who he was. As they sat together beneath the glowing plants, Cass felt the last of his old defenses dissolve. He had spent years drifting through the void, repairing broken things while leaving his own wounds untended. Now, unexpectedly, he had found healing in the most unlikely place, aboard an alien vessel, among beings from a scattered civilization, united by a common purpose and an uncommon bond. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring when they reached the Silurian settlement. He couldn't predict how their mission would unfold, what challenges they would face, or how long this journey might last. But for the first time and longer than he could remember, Cass Breener was exactly where he wanted to be. Not alone, not merely passing through, but truly, completely home. As Breener slouched in the pilot's seat of his personal repair shuttle, drifting aimlessly through the silent void. His fingers drummed an irregular beat on the console as he scrolled through the job notices on his outdated comm channel. The blue light of the display cast harsh shadows across his unshaven face, highlighting the premature lines around his eyes. Souvenirs from squinting at broken machinery in poorly lit engine rooms across 3 systems. Nothing worthwhile today either, he muttered to himself, a habit born from too many solo flights. He took a swig from his thermos, grimacing at the lukewarm coffee. Just the usual planetary maintenance gigs. Change filters. Recalibrate atmosphere processors. Fix dome leaks. Boring. Cass had never planned on becoming a wandering repair engineer. Like most things in his life, it had just happened, a series of circumstances and split-second decisions that led him far from any place he might have called home. Now his home was this 30-year-old shuttle with mismatched hull plates and a temperamental life support system that he'd modified so many times it barely resembled the original specs. He was about to power down the comm system when a weak signal broke through the static, fragmented and distorted, but carrying an unmistakable urgency. Cass straightened in his seat, fingers hovering over the controls as he tried to clear the reception. Immediate assistance. Critical systems failing. Coordinates attached. Please respond. The voice faded in and out, interspersed with bursts of static. Cass frowned, checking the broadcast frequency. It was an old emergency band, one that hadn't been in regular use for at least a decade. Most modern ships had switched to the standardized distress protocols years ago. Could be a trap, he mused, taking another sip of coffee. Could be salvagers trying to lure in easy marks. His experiences had taught him caution, perhaps too much of it. But something about the voice, there had been real desperation there. And despite his cynicism, despite the walls he'd built around himself, Cass had never been able to ignore a genuine cry for help. "Computer, plot a course to those coordinates," he said with a sigh, "and run diagnostics on the repair kits." As the shuttle's engines hummed to life, Cass couldn't shake the feeling that he was heading towards something more significant than just another repair job. A prickle of anticipation, or perhaps warning, crawled up his spine, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. The coordinates led him to a remote sector, far from established trade routes. After 3 hours of travel, the ship's sensors detected a large mass drifting ahead. Cass switched to manual control, approaching cautiously. When a mysterious ship came into view, Cass let out a low whistle. It was unlike anything he'd seen before, sleek and organic-looking despite signs of age and damage. Its hull was a burnished copper color that seemed to absorb the distant starlight rather than reflect it. Patches of what appeared to be the outer shell had peeled away, revealing intricate patterns beneath that reminded Cass of circulatory systems rather than typical mechanical components. "What kind of ship are you?" he murmured, circling the vessel to assess its condition. A hailing frequency opened on his comm without prompting. "You came," a soft voice breathed, relief evident in the musical lilt of the words. "We had almost given up hope." "I received your distress signal," Cass replied cautiously. "What's your situation?" "Our ship requires repair," another voice answered, similar to the first but with a slightly deeper timbre. "We have been adrift for some time now." "I can see that," Cass said. "Any immediate life-threatening issues I should know about before attempting to dock?" "The docking bay is functional," the first voice assured him. "We will guide you in." Cass followed their instructions, guiding his shuttle into a port that opened like a flower on the larger ship's side. As the outer doors sealed behind him and the chamber pressurized, he gathered his basic toolkit and prepared to meet his mysterious clients. The inner doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing 2 slender figures waiting for him. Cass froze mid-step, his toolkit suddenly heavy in his hand. They were nearly human in appearance, with delicate features and large, expressive eyes that seemed to shift color in the dim light. But their long, pointed ears and the silver sheen of their waist-length hair marked them as something else entirely. Both wore simple jumpsuits of an iridescent material that seemed to flow like liquid around their bodies. "Welcome to the Alderan," said the one on the left, her smile revealing teeth just slightly too sharp to be human. "I am Lyri." "And I am Vexa," said her twin, stepping forward with the same mysterious smile. "We are most grateful for your arrival, Cass Breener." Cass frowned. "I don't recall giving you my name." The twins exchanged a glance that seemed to hold volumes of unspoken communication. "The ship told us," Vexa said simply, as if that explained everything. "The ship," Cass repeated flatly. "Right? You are confused," Lyri observed, her head tilting slightly. "That is understandable, but all will become clear in time. We have been waiting for someone like you," Vexa added, her gaze uncomfortably direct. Someone who could hear a call across the void. Cass shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. "Look, I just picked up a distress signal. Nothing mystical about it. I'm here to fix whatever's broken, get paid, and be on my way." The twins smiled in unison, and Cass couldn't shake the feeling that they knew something he didn't, something important. "Of course," Lyri said smoothly. "Please follow us. We will show you what needs repair." As they led him from the docking bay, Cass couldn't help but feel that he'd just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple repair job. The twins moved with fluid grace ahead of him, occasionally glancing back as if to ensure he was still following. Their silver hair caught the soft ambient light of the corridors, creating halos that seemed to float around their heads like ghostly coronas. Cass had encountered many strange things in his years of drifting through the outer systems, but something about these twins and their mysterious ship set off warning bells in his mind. Yet curiosity pushed him forward, one step at a time, deeper into the vessel that would change his life forever. As Cass passed through the airlock into the main body of the ship, he was struck by an unexpected warmth. Most distress vessels were cold, their life support systems among the first to fail or be dialed back to conserve power. But the Alderan, if that was indeed its name, felt almost balmy, as if heated by some internal furnace. The corridor they entered pulsed with soft light that followed no discernible pattern, rippling along the walls like sunlight through water. Even more disconcerting was the subtle sound that seemed to permeate the air, a gentle rhythmic hum that reminded Cass of breathing. "Is that normal?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at their surroundings. "The ship lives," Vexa replied simply. Lyrae elaborated, seeing his confusion. "What you call the Alderan, we know as Siluria. She is not constructed of metal and circuits as your vessels are. She is grown, nurtured from seed to maturity." "Grown," Cass echoed, his engineer's mind struggling to reconcile this information with his understanding of spacecraft. "Our people," Vexa began, then paused as if reconsidering her words. "Our ancestors perfected the art of bioorganic engineering long ago. Siluria is one of the last of her kind, a living ship capable of bonding with her crew." They continued through a series of chambers, each more strange than the last. In one, luminescent plants grew from the very walls, their fronds swaying despite the lack of any detectable breeze. In another, what appeared to be liquid flowed upward in spiraling columns, defying gravity in patterns too regular to be natural, yet too fluid to be mechanical. "This is all very interesting," Cass said carefully, "but I still don't understand what I'm supposed to fix. These systems are completely alien to me." "We are approaching the heart of the matter," Lyrae assured him. "Siluria's core systems are failing. She can no longer navigate the paths between stars as she once did." They led him to what Cass assumed was the engine room, though it bore little resemblance to any he had ever seen. Instead of the expected machinery, the chamber was dominated by a massive, pulsating structure that reminded him of a heart, if hearts were the size of small shuttles and glowed with an inner phosphorescence. The structure was encased in a transparent material, through which Cass could see countless filaments, like blood vessels or neural pathways, extending outward to connect with the ship's systems. Several of these connections appeared dormant, their glow dim or entirely absent. Cass circled the structure slowly, his trained eye noting the places where the connections had been severed or had simply withered away. But something struck him as odd. Many of these disconnections looked deliberate, not the result of age or malfunction. "These aren't accidents," he said finally, turning to face the twins. "Someone intentionally disconnected these systems." The sisters exchanged another of their meaningful glances. "You are perceptive," Vexa acknowledged. "Yes, certain connections were deliberately severed. We had to ensure the right person would come," Lyrae added. "Someone who could truly understand Siluria's needs." Cass's eyes narrowed. "You sent out a distress signal to lure someone here? Why me specifically?" "Not you specifically," Vexa corrected, "but someone like you. Someone with the right resonance." "Resonance," Cass repeated flatly. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm just an engineer. I fix things that are broken. If you wanted a mystic or a priest, you called the wrong frequency. And yet you came," Lyrae pointed out gently. "Out of all who might have heard our call, it was you who answered." "Because I happened to be in range," Cass countered, but a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that it might not be that simple. The odds of him being in that particular sector, with his comm tuned to that specific old frequency, were astronomical. "What exactly do you want from me?" he asked, suddenly wary. "We want you to help restore Siluria," Vexa said, "to re-establish the connections that have been lost. And how am I supposed to do that with technology I've never seen before?" Lyrae smiled. "The same way you have always done your work, Cass Breener. With your hands, your mind, and your heart." Cass snorted. "My heart doesn't usually factor into repair work." "Perhaps that is why you were drawn here," Vexa suggested. "Because this is not your usual repair work." Despite his misgivings, Cass found himself examining the core structure more closely. The engineer in him couldn't resist the puzzle, the challenge of understanding this alien technology. He ran his hand along one of the dormant filaments, and to his shock, it twitched beneath his touch as if responding to him. What the? He jerked his hand back. Siluria can sense your presence, Lyrae explained. She recognizes your potential. Cass wanted to argue, to insist. That ships, even living ones, couldn't recognize anything. But the evidence was before his eyes. Whatever this vessel was, it operated on principles far beyond his training. I'll need to examine the whole system before I can start any repairs, he said finally, falling back on professional procedure. Map out what's connected to what, figure out what these filaments do. The twins nodded in apparent approval. We will leave you to your work, Vexus said. Siluria will guide you. The ship will guide me, Cass muttered after they had gone. Perfect. Just perfect. But as he began to trace the complex network of biological circuitry, he couldn't deny a growing fascination. Whatever the twins' true motives, the technology before him was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Beautiful in its complexity, elegant in its design. Despite himself, Cass felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had first drawn him to engineering, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. With a resigned sigh, he unpacked his diagnostic tools and set to work, determined to unravel the mysteries of this living ship, one connection at a time. The repairs progressed slowly over the following days, with Cass gradually adapting his engineering knowledge to the ship's unique biology. He found himself spending hours tracing pathways through Siluria's systems, mapping connections, and cautiously re-establishing links that had been severed. To his surprise, the ship seemed to respond to his efforts, sometimes guiding his hands with subtle pulses of light or warmth. It was unsettling at first, this sense of collaboration with the vessel itself, but Cass grudgingly admitted it made the work easier. Lyrae and Vexo were constant presences, appearing silently at his side with tools he hadn't realized he needed or answering questions before he could fully articulate them. Their uncanny ability to anticipate his needs would have been more disturbing if it weren't so useful. How exactly does this navigation system work? Cass asked one afternoon, gesturing to a cluster of glowing filaments that resembled a neural network more than any star chart he recognized. Siluria does not merely travel through space, Lyrae explained, her fingers tracing the air above the filaments without touching them. She feels the currents between stars, the pathways that exist beyond normal perception. Like slipstreams, Cass suggested, try to relate it to something familiar. Similar, but more fundamental, Vexus said. Your scientists might call them quantum filaments or cosmic strings. Our people simply called them the weave. And this, Cass pointed to a particularly complex junction where multiple strands converged. This interprets these pathways? It does more than interpret, Lyrae corrected. It communes with them. Siluria is part of the weave, connected to all things. Cass bit back a skeptical retort. He'd encountered enough strange phenomena in his travels to know that dismissing unfamiliar concepts outright was short-sighted. Instead, he focused on the practical aspects, the connections he could trace and understand. These strands here, he said, pointing to a cluster that seemed particularly damaged, they're completely severed. I'm not sure how to reconnect them without understanding what they do. Those are the empathic relays, Vexus said quietly. They allow Siluria to connect with her crew on a deeper level. You mean like a neural interface? Cass had seen systems that allowed for direct mental commands, though they were rare and typically restricted to military vessels. More intimate than that, Lyrae said. A sharing of consciousness, of purpose. Cass frowned. That sounds invasive. It is mutual, Vexo assured him. A gift freely given and received. The conversation shifted to technical details after that, but the concept lingered in Cass's mind as he worked. The idea of sharing consciousness with a ship, or with anyone, made him profoundly uncomfortable. He valued his independence, the walls he'd built around himself. The thought of anything breaching those barriers sent a shiver down his spine. Yet as the days passed, he found himself growing accustomed to the ship's subtle presence, the way it seemed to anticipate his movements or adjust the ambient lighting to suit his needs. It was almost companionable. One evening, after a particularly long session of repairs, Lyrae invited him to join them for a meal. Too tired to refuse, Cass followed her to a chamber he hadn't seen before, a sort of greenhouse filled with plants that glowed with bioluminescence, casting the room in a dreamlike blue-green light. A small table had been set with simple but elegant dishware that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured, with patterns that spiraled organically across their surfaces. The food itself was equally strange. Fruits and vegetables in shapes Cass didn't recognize, and dishes that seemed to shift subtly as if still alive. "Is this safe for me to eat?" he asked, poking at something that resembled a cross between a flower and a mushroom. "Siluria has analyzed your biology," Vexa assured him. "These foods have been adjusted to suit your needs." The meal was surprisingly delicious, with flavors that reminded Cass of long-forgotten childhood treats and exotic spices he'd encountered on distant worlds. The twins ate sparingly, seeming more interested in watching him enjoy the food than in consuming it themselves. As they ate, the conversation drifted to more personal topics. "You travel alone," Lyrae observed. "Have you always preferred solitude?" Cass shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction. "It's simpler. No one to disappoint. No one to answer to. No one to lose," Vexa added softly, with such insight that Cass nearly choked on his drink. "I didn't say that," he muttered, but the twins just watched him with their disconcertingly perceptive eyes. After a moment, Lyrae changed the subject. "Would you like to know about our people?" Grateful for the shift, Cass nodded. "I've been curious. I've never encountered anyone like you before." "Few have," Vexa said with a hint of sadness. "We are the last of the Silurians, at least in this part of the galaxy." "What happened to the rest?" Cass asked, instantly regretting the question when he saw the shadow pass over their faces. "Diaspora," Lyrae replied. "Our homeworld was lost long ago. Our people scattered across the stars, seeking new beginnings. Some found them," Vexa continued. "Others faded into myth and memory. And you too. We are the keepers of Siluria," Lyrae said simply. "The last of the navigators. We were in stasis for many cycles," Vexa added, "until Siluria sensed something changing in the weave. She woke us to seek it out." Cass had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going. And that something was not a something, Lyrae corrected. A someone. The implication hung in the air between them. Cass pushed his plate away, appetite suddenly gone. "Look, I appreciate the hospitality, but I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a repair engineer. I'm not anyone's chosen one or destined savior or whatever it is you think I am." "We do not think you are anything," Vexa said calmly. "We know what we feel in the weave, and Siluria knows what she needs." "And what exactly does she need?" Cass demanded. "Connection," Lyrae replied. "A heart that understands loneliness. A mind that builds bridges where others see only void." Cass stood abruptly. "I think I've had enough mystical talk for one night. I'll get back to the repairs tomorrow." He left them there, retreating to the small chamber they had provided for his use during his stay. But sleep eluded him as their words circled in his mind, touching on truths he preferred not to acknowledge. His self-imposed isolation, the emptiness he'd been running from for years. Eventually, he drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of silver-haired twins leading him through endless corridors that breathed and pulsed like living things, always searching for something just beyond his reach. The next morning, Cass awoke with a renewed determination to focus on the concrete task at hand. He was an engineer, not a mystic. He would repair the ship's systems, accept whatever payment the twins offered, and be on his way. End of story. But as he approached the heart of Siluria, he found his resolve wavering. The central chamber seemed different somehow, the pulsing light dimmer, the rhythm of the ship's breathing more labored. It was as if the vessel was in pain. "What's happening?" he asked when Lyrae appeared beside him. "Siluria struggles," she said simply. "The connections you have restored are helping, but the core remains unstable." Cass approached the central structure, running his hand along its surface. The material was warm, almost feverish, and he could feel vibrations beneath his palm, like a heartbeat but erratic. "This isn't just about the navigation system, is it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Lirei admitted. The navigation is merely a symptom. Siluria's core consciousness is fragmenting. She cannot maintain coherence without anchoring. And that's where I come in, Cass guessed. You want me to be this anchor? Lirei nodded. You have the right resonance. Siluria recognized it immediately. But what does that even mean? Cass demanded, frustration building. What is this resonance you keep talking about? It is difficult to explain in your language, Lirei said, her brow furrowing. It is like a harmony of spirit, a compatibility that transcends physical form. So what? I'm spiritually compatible with your ship? That's crazy. Is it? Lirei challenged gently. You have felt it yourself, have you not? The way Siluria responds to your touch, your thoughts. The ease with which you have adapted to her systems despite having no prior knowledge of them. Cass wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. There had been moments during his work when he had known, somehow, exactly what to do, as if the ship was guiding him, or as if he had some innate understanding of its needs. Even if that's true, he argued, what you're asking, it's too much. You want me to do what? Merge with your ship? Become part of it permanently? Not permanently, Vexa said, appearing from the shadows. At least, not necessarily, but long enough to stabilize her core, to teach her how to maintain coherence on her own again. And how long would that take? Cass asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. The twins exchanged one of their inscrutable glances. We do not know, Lirei admitted. It could be days. It could be years. Years. Cass barked a humorless laugh. You expect me to put my life on hold for years on the off chance that I can help your ship recover from whatever this is? That's insane. What life would you be putting on hold? Vexa asked quietly. Your endless drifting? Your solitary repairs in forgotten corners of space? The question hit too close to home, and Cass felt anger flare within him. My life is my own. I chose it. Did you? Lirei's voice was soft, almost pitying. Or did you merely accept it when other choices seemed too painful? Cass turned away, unwilling to let them see the truth in his eyes. Yes, he had chosen this life, but not because it was what he wanted. It was what felt safe after everything he had lost. This conversation is over, he said firmly. I'll finish the repairs I can make, and then I'm gone. He stomped off to gather his tools, ignoring the disappointed looks on the twins' faces. He was not responsible for their ship's well-being beyond what they had contracted him for. He was not responsible for anyone but himself. And yet, as he worked on the secondary systems that day, Cass couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important, that there was truth in what the twins had said, however uncomfortable it might be to acknowledge it. By the third day, Cass had made significant progress on the technical repairs. The ship's basic functions were now operating at acceptable levels, and many of the minor systems had been fully restored. But the central issue, the instability of Siluria's core, remained unresolved. As he sat cross-legged on the deck, recalibrating a cluster of neural pathways, Cass found himself talking to the ship as if it could hear him. At first, it was just the engineer's habit of muttering to himself while working, but gradually he realized he was actually addressing Siluria directly. You're quite the puzzle, aren't you? He said, carefully reattaching a filament that had come loose. Never seen anything like you before. The lights around him dimmed slightly, then brightened, as if in response. Was that you? Cass asked, looking up. Can you understand me? Another pulse of light, this one more deliberate. Huh, Cass murmured. So the twins weren't exaggerating about you being conscious. He returned to his work, but with a new awareness of the ship as an entity, not just a complex machine, but a being with its own thoughts and feelings. They seem to think I'm special somehow, he continued after a while. That I have some kind of connection to you that can help you heal. The temperature in the room increased slightly, a pleasant warmth that seemed to envelop him like a blanket. That's not an answer, Cass said, but he found himself smiling despite his resistance. Later that evening, Lirei found him in the heart chamber, sitting quietly with his hand resting on the central structure. You're communicating with her, she observed. Cass started, pulling his hand away guiltily. Just running some diagnostics. Lirei's knowing smile told him she wasn't fooled. It's all right, you know. To admit that you feel something here. That this place, this ship, affects you. Cass sighed, too tired to maintain his defenses. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's like she's responding to me specifically, not just the technical inputs. She is, Lyrae confirmed. Siluria forms unique bonds with those she encounters. Some are stronger than others. And mine is exceptionally strong. It is why we believe you are the one who can help her fully recover. Cass ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood he'd never quite shaken. Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, I don't know how. The final step would require a more direct connection, Lyrae explained. A temporary merging of consciousness that would allow you to see Siluria as she truly is and help her reintegrate her fragmented systems. That sounds, Cass searched for the right word, invasive. It is intimate, Lyrae acknowledged, but not invasive. Siluria would never force such a connection. It must be freely offered. Cass stood up, pacing the chamber as he tried to process what she was suggesting. And what happens after? Assuming this works and I help her reintegrate, then what? Then you would be free to go, if that is still your wish. The if hung in the air between them. Lyrae didn't need to spell out what they both knew, that such a connection would change him, perhaps in ways he couldn't predict or control. I need time to think about this, Cass said finally. Lyrae nodded. Of course, but Siluria's condition worsens daily. We may not have much time left. After she left, Cass remained in the heart chamber, lost in thought. Part of him, the part that had survived by keeping everyone and everything at arm's length, screamed at him to run, to return to his shuttle and leave this strange ship and its enigmatic caretakers behind. But another part, one he had suppressed for years, was intrigued by the possibility of connection, of being truly needed for something more meaningful than fixing leaky pipes or rewiring faulty consoles. He placed his hand back on the pulsing core, feeling the warmth that radiated from within. What do you want? He whispered. What are you trying to tell me? The response came not in words, but in sensations, a wave of loneliness so profound it took his breath away, followed by a yearning for something just beyond reach. It resonated with his own carefully buried feelings, striking a chord so deep he couldn't ignore it. I understand, he murmured, and for the first time in years, he truly meant it. When morning came, Cass sought out the twins, finding them in the greenhouse chamber where they had shared their meal. They looked up as he entered, their expressions hopeful but restrained. I've made a decision, he said without preamble. I'll help Siluria, or try to, at least. But I need to understand exactly what I'm getting into. Relief washed over their faces, and Vexa moved forward to clasp his hand. Thank you, she said simply. This means more than you know. I haven't done anything yet, Cass reminded her. But you have chosen to try, Lyrae pointed out. That alone is significant. They led him back to the heart chamber, explaining the process more fully along the way. The merging would involve Cass placing his hands on specific points of the core structure, while the twins facilitated the connection through some form of psychic ability they possessed as Silurians. Will it hurt? Cass asked as they prepared the chamber, adjusting the lighting and sound levels to create what Lyrae called optimal resonance. Not physically, Vexo assured him, but it may be emotionally challenging. Siluria carries centuries of memories, and you will experience some of them. Great, Cass muttered. Just what I need, more emotional baggage. When everything was ready, the twins positioned themselves on either side of the core, their silver hair flowing freely around them, as if suspended in water. They motioned for Cass to step forward. Place your hands here and here, Lyrae instructed, indicating 2 points where the filaments converged. Cass hesitated, a last flicker of doubt passing through him. Then, taking a deep breath, he reached out and pressed his palms against the warm surface of the core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a tingling sensation began to spread up his arms, across his shoulders, and finally into his chest. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like electricity without the shock, or heat without the burn. The twins began to sing, a haunting melody without words that seemed to resonate within Cass's very bones. The world around him began to fade, replaced by a series of images that flashed through his mind with increasing speed. He saw Siluria in her prime, gliding through the cosmos with a grace no conventional ship could match. He felt the joy of her crew, generations of Silurians who had lived and died within her halls, each leaving a mark on her consciousness. Then came the darker memories, the destruction of the Silurian homeworld, the desperate flight of survivors, the slow decline of their once great civilization. He felt Siluria's grief as she watched her people dwindle, her loneliness as she drifted through empty space with only the twins in suspended animation as company. And beneath it all was a profound longing for connection, for purpose, for the sense of belonging that had been lost when her civilization fell. It mirrored Cass's own hidden yearnings so perfectly that he couldn't distinguish between her pain and his own. The barriers he had erected, the walls he had built to protect himself from further loss, seemed meaningless in the face of such shared understanding. Somewhere distant, he heard himself sob, a sound of release rather than sorrow. And as his defenses crumbled, something remarkable happened. The fragmented parts of Siluria's consciousness began to realign, drawn together by the magnetic pull of his empathy. Cass couldn't have explained the mechanics of what was happening any more than he could have described the color of wind or the sound of silence. But he felt it working, felt the ship's scattered awareness coalescing into a unified whole, felt her gratitude washing over him in waves. When the connection finally broke, Cass collapsed to his knees, trembling from the intensity of the experience. The twins were immediately at his side, supporting him, murmuring words of comfort in their musical language. What happened? He managed to ask once he could speak again. You did it, Lyrae said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You helped Siluria find herself again. Indeed, the chamber had transformed around them. The core now pulsed with a steady, radiant light, and the ship's systems hummed with renewed vigor. The air itself seemed clearer, fresher, as if Siluria was breathing more easily. I felt everything, Cass whispered. Her joy, her pain, everything. And she felt yours, Vexa confirmed gently. Such is the nature of true connection. Cass should have been terrified by this invasion of his most private thoughts and feelings. Instead, he felt strangely relieved, as if a burden he had carried for years had finally been shared, its weight halved in the sharing. What now? He asked, looking around at the transformed chamber. Now, Lyrae said with a smile, Siluria lives again. She can navigate the weave, seek out others of our kind, perhaps even find a new home. And you? Cass asked, what will you do? The twins exchanged a look that spoke volumes. We will continue as we always have, Vexa said, guiding Siluria, preserving what remains of our heritage. Alone, Cass observed. Not necessarily, Lyrae replied, her gaze direct and challenging. Siluria has formed a bond with you now. Such bonds are rare and precious. It would be regrettable to sever it so soon. See,